With me today is President and CEO of Northern Iron, Basil Botha. And Basil has been looking at the iron ore market for some time. And with things being a little quiet, he's decided that he is going to make some additional activities on the Northern Iron property. And today I want to actually talk to him about that. So, Basil, the first question that I've got is, given that the market is not being kind to iron ore players at the moment, what opportunities do you see for Northern Iron in the short term?
We made an acquisition uh, some 18 months ago for the quarry rights of all the rock that's been removed from the Griffiths pit and it's piled up, according to the people that we did the transaction with. There's 90 million tons. So in the meantime, and I didn't want to really do anything about this whilst we were in full environmental permitting, pumping, etc. So now that essentially the iron ore market's quietened down, I've gone back to looking at the aggregate business in the area, and I did a tour up there about a month ago to try and determine exactly what the potential market was, and came up with three potential names of people that could use this aggregate. So now we've got the specifications from the Ministry of Roads in terms of what they require for aggregate. I've spoken to these people that are contractors up there, and definitely there is a need for aggregate in that area. To what extent it is right now, I don't know. But when one of our geologists goes up there in the next month, he will conduct some tests, and we'll do some screening, crushing, as well as specifications on the actual rock that we're dealing with, in order to see where this takes us. But in the meantime, having driven around the area, Red Lake, Ear Falls area, there's enormous need for aggregate for road building in that particular area. A lot of it seems to come in from the Dryden, Kenora area right now. And as you know, the transport is extremely expensive. So what I've been told from these contractors, that if they can find a source of good aggregate in that area, there is potential for the market. So it's going to take a little while to boil it down and come up with all the stats and exactly where this could take us.
Good. Well, it sounds very attractive that you'd have some cash flow in the short term with money being so tight in the iron ore industry.
Yeah, the cash flow is extremely important, particularly sustainability, and to make sure that we at least can manage our burn rate with the cash flow. So that's really important as far as moving ahead and determining exactly what the aggregate potential is in the area. But like I say, it's not going to be overnight. It's going to take some work.
Good. Well, the other thing that you recently mentioned as well was that there's a potential for an electricity project on the mine, and given that the area is constrained with electricity, perhaps you can give us some insight into that.
I picked up an article in Northern Ontario Business about a defunct mine between Montreal and Toronto that is planning to do exactly that. They'll build a reservoir. They've got a lot of rock and tailings on the ground. They'll build a reservoir, pump or put water through the system during peak hours, and then pump it back during off-peak hours. That, well, to use a pun, piqued my interest. So what I did was started looking around with what the potential was, and we've spoken to some interested parties, which you know who they are, and I've just picked up some further dialogue with an individual out of Thunder Bay who's very in tune with electricity needs in that particular area, and it could potentially work for Griffiths. There's no question about it. We have the main pit, Griffiths pit, which is 85 meters deep at its deepest point, and we have the south pit, which is mined out essentially. And my idea is to build a reservoir around the south pit and let the water flow down into the Griffiths in peak hour, and then pump it back up. But this individual, once I pick up further dialogue with him, will give me a further idea of exactly what the potential is. But he seems to be quite positive on it.
Good. Well, thanks very much. I think those things are useful for our investors to know. I think one question that they probably all have still is, does this alter any of the overall long-term plans for Griffith in any way, or is this a new direction for Northern Iron?
The aggregate business, no. I mean, that doesn't alter. We can continue um, with environmental and putting the mine back in production and still run an aggregate business on the sideline, which obviously we would contract out to a potential contractor in the area and just take um, a, a royalty off the top. That wouldn't impact our plans for the Griffiths in the long term to make HBI. What would impact the mine potentially is if you set up a hydro scheme, and what I envisioned, that would obviously negate putting the mine back into production. But then we're looking at a potential producing electricity, which is infinite. I mean, you can continue to produce electricity for the next 20, 30, 40 years in that particular area.
And of course, you still have the other properties anyway. This is only one property.
This is only one property, so we could still continue with the infrastructure that we've got. For example, mine the Carras property and produce HBI. That doesn't stop us with the other properties. But as far as the Griffiths is concerned, yes, that would sort of put that would definitely take us in another direction.
Good. Well, thank you, Basil. I think that's all the questions I've got time for now. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you, and we'll do this again.